of our great American writers that wrote Look Homeward Angel. The guy that could play Thomas Wolfe was the star of Eraserhead that played Henry. He was a perfect spitting image of Thomas Wolfe, 100%. Jude Law did a pretty good job. He played Thomas Wolfe. But Thomas Wolfe wrote a whole collection of books. The Web and the Rock. He wrote like... Okay, sorry. Thomas Wolfe wrote kind of in poetry. Remember, the novel was created by John Bunyan. So John Bunyan said, what we want to do in a novel is his character, the protagonist, goes from this point to another point. He goes from this town to this town. He meets these people and this people. We follow him along almost third person, yet he had monologues. So he spoke to the audience. He had a narrative voice, and it was kind of real. And he described some of the scenes, and, you know, almost kind of how Shakespeare does in some of his plays. But John Bunyan did it in a way where it was very novelistic. So it was a novel. And Thomas Wolfe didn't always approach the format of novel. It wasn't necessarily about the guy crossing the road, but his, like, a big portion of his life would go by as the plot simply he crossed the road. And when he got to the other side of the road, we have gone through 4 or 5 chapters. So physically, it wasn't like your ideal novel in a physical form going from point A to point B. It was a lot of rambling and ranting in the unauthorized version of Oh Lost, which became Look Homeward Angel. So it was like kind of rambling narrative, you know, still a novel, but almost poetry. You know, he talked about a rock, an unturned leaf, or an unturned rock, or something, and then a leaf, and then, you know, he had all this kind of stuff where he started off kind of just, you know, kind of poetry, and you're like, what am I reading? And then all of a sudden there's dialogue, and then these characters introduced, and so it was genius, and they got a hold of it, and they decided, this guy's great. Similar to how they got Cormac McCarthy. Cormac lived in a shack. I think it was like no floor. He had a wife. He was married. They were living in a shack, and there was no floor, and it was like real poor stuff. This is when he was doing Sutri, writing Sutri, and they knew about him. He was in there doing it, and then they're writing till he was doing it all day. He'd tell his wife, put on the beans. You know, you ever watch Cormac interview, you could tell he's been through something, and that's called starvation. And he's kind of like, Cormac McCarthy's kind of like, well, you know, I don't know, you know, it's just that kind of thing, you know. Well, you know, I don't know. I just, you know, I see what you're saying. He I don't think he really wants to do a lot of commentary on his books when they talk about the road. Oprah Winfrey interviewed Cormac McCarthy. Everyone said it was an awkward and strange interview. But, you know, Oprah Winfrey is like, you know, this is Faulkner, you know. This is like a Faulkner kind of guy. He won a Faulkner Award. Not Oprah, but Cormac McCarthy. Oprah probably writes a little bit. But, you know, he doesn't say a whole lot about the books that he writes. Kind of how Lynch doesn't talk about his movies. And so it's there, and he kind of, you know, yeah, well, you know, I guess so. You know, they had me on set at Old Men. There's No Country for Old Men, and you know, he's very orderly. His thoughts are very pronounced. He uses the word "and" a whole lot, and he's not afraid to use it in the middle of one sentence 4 or 5 times to connect everything very directly. Very direct. This is Overton. So Cormac kind of invented this rogue. I call it a rogue. I don't know if that's the right English word. It's a voice. So it's his voice. There it is, right there. There he goes. Let's see if I can see where he goes. Yeah, he's a loose dog. I hate to see that. Some will rescue him, but they can bite. But Cormac has his own voice, and he'll stick to it. So they found it as right, and it works. It does have verse, so it does have verse, and it does have the opposite, which is the opposite of verse would be I guess colloquial language, regular kind of language. They have another name for it. I'm drawing a blank. Not everything in today's culture is even verse, but a while back in Shakespeare's time, it was sometimes things can be all in verse, and even iambic pentameter. So he has a rhythm like that, but it's not iambic. It's not a pentameter, but it's similar, and there's probably a rhythm to it, and it's biblical too. But then he goes into what's called just regular language is a way to say it. It's called prose. Thank you. Ben Gant's ghost. Prose is what it's called. And he'll go into prose as well to describe things, and then he'll go back into this verse kind of thing. It's like a biblical kind of verse. It's very almost ancient sounding. Where is this coming from? Not even Sam Shepard had that kind of drawl. Not even Sam Shepard had that type of verse. I guess to say verse, there might be an argument with some professors. Nah, it's not really verse, Cole. It's something else. Okay, well, whatever it is, you describe it. But what it is it's kind of like a very distinct language that sounds biblical. Is that better? Okay, that's better. It's a language that sounds a little biblical. So, just the thing. I was reading Passenger just the other day. I was reading it again. I'm like, where is this coming from? Very similar kind of Thomas Wolfe kind of thing, and maybe even Faulkner. All right, the rear corner of this one looks like looks like something Doc Brown would live in Back to the Future, doesn't it? To me, it looks exactly like the Back to the Future house right here in this area, Overton Park. It's got a dog named Einstein. A house or an institution. I don't know where maybe we'll just go straight ahead. There's a thing you can do. Actors know how to do it. I've done it before a few plays. We're not allowed to be sick. Actors cannot be. The sickness, Antonio Artois says it belongs in the theater, but he was talking about art. The actor himself has to be well. So there's a way to do it. You have to stand up and do it, and you breathe all the way in, and then you kind of push on your lungs, and then you exhale all the way, and then you do the opposite and kind of suck them in, and then you exercise it until it starts to come up. I gotta go right now. And you breathe all the way in, and then kind of breathe out, holding your breath, and then breathe all the way out. Do the same, but suck in, and then you can suck all the way in, and then you do the same thing, breathing all the way out. eventually you can feel it getting in there, and then you spit it out. It has zero to do with corona. This has to do with any kind of cough or cold, and you can do it before the performance, after. What it does is it prevents you from clearing your throat. I can feel it already coming up here, and then I would be able to spit that out. It's kind of aerating your lungs, and it's also cleaning them. And you do it even if you're not. Sometimes you can do it even if you're not even sick, because you'll realize, wow, I got some little bit of dust in there, you know. But you can do it on a common cold issue or whatever. But it's exercising the lungs and moving that congestion around so you don't have that waiting. Because what happens is it resonates on the old vocal cords, and then all of a sudden you're talking like kind of like that, you know. Sound like almost like Alec Baldwin, and you know, when he was smoking cigarettes for that one role, which is okay. It's not, you know, but in the theater it's got to be clear. And the theater, in film, you'll get away with it. But in theater, when you're out there, and even if you're playing a sick character, you still have to have it clear and resonated. I'm trying to think which way this Whataburger is. I'm going to guess that way. And once it's resonated, then you're clear for takeoff on the stage. But you'll go through it. And listen, I've been sick. You know, if you get the laryngitis, then you gotta have then that's when the guy comes in, the understudy comes in, because you'll be out there going, what'd he say? Didn't quite get that. We've had cases where we had to have the understudy come in. It can happen. It happened in a couple of performances. It was close. I had gotten a cold. I had to get that it's like a Dr. Swishers or whatever, I can't think of the name, Switchers, and it's like an antiseptic that's very potent. You mix it with water. There's also throat lozenges and all these things you have to go through. Opera singers, they're experts on the nose, throat, and ears. Opera singers know all about it to a very great detail, and they can go through the salt water, warming salt water and honey. And they do it even when they're well. A lot of them, some of them are even smokers, or they shouldn't be. We'll talk about that some other time, about opera singers. I love the floodlights up in the trees. It captures me, gets my attention. I've got so many of them. There's something about that I really like. I used to put lamps up in trees, and we'd jump in the trampoline, and we'd jump up in where those lamps were in that light in the middle of the darkness. We'd go out at night, and we'd put lamps. I don't know why, we were like a circus thing. So we had this trampoline, this huge trampoline, and we had this tree right underneath it, which and we could jump out of the tree limbs onto the trampoline, do like triple backflips. We were like gymnasts. We'd put the lamps in the trees and turn the lamps on. You know, those kinds that you turn the lamp on, and they'd be in the trees, sitting in the trees. We had extension cords and stuff. It was just an interesting kind of, if we had a camera back then, we were, 12, maybe 11 or 12. Subject, I don't know if I'm going to title it, because I don't title all my subjects, but overeating, the well delved into a good kind of a big chunk of knowledge on the abuse of overeating, which is neglected to talk about. It's a neglected subject in the church. It's not talked about, yet it's there. It's there. And when you say one sin is worse than the other and all this stuff, then you don't know the biblical aspect of Christianity. Because no one sin is better or worse than the other. Society develops that. Society categorizes this sin is worse than that sin, and no, it doesn't work that way. Not in God's eyes. So in overeating, there's a thing called anger eating. He shows it. Brendan Fraser's character, Charlie, shows it. And Brendan showed it as well, but Charlie had a problem and it was out of control, and we saw a private moment with him in the refrigerator and the thing of jelly, and I think it was like a bagel and some pizza, or it was the jelly was going on the pizza. And listen, when I was in LA and I weighed about 150 pounds, I was not going to restaurants and sitting down and having a hamburger and french fries, which a 150 pound man and weighing at 6 feet could do. I was buying 10 protein bars. I was living on soy. I had a weird diet, very strange. It was like 10 protein bars and a pound of dates. You know those dates? And that was my dinner. I'd eat maybe 5 to 6 of them, sometimes 7. And then, you know, I like those Matrix bars, which is a meal replacement bar. Then after 2 days, I would weigh exactly at 150 again, or 147 at sometimes. And this was when I was 27. This is right before I went in to the studio, to the actor studio. So by the time I got to New York, it changed. And the diet was sometimes, because of money, it was sometimes like a loaf of bread, and I'd get a hold of like a half jar of honey. So I would dip the bread in honey and I would eat that. And honey I was always sought after honey. I had a big appetite for honey. But I was very careful. I wouldn't go out and have a steak. I was almost kind of I was pretty much like a vegan or vegetarian, pretty strict. But I would boil eggs and eat the white part of the egg with maybe peas and stuff. But when it came to anger eating or out of control or emotional eating, I did have a problem. But I would buy these, basically it was very strange. It was called Peanut Wonder. It was like it was made, the ingredients had what's similar to Topiakic pudding. I'm not saying it right, but you know what I'm really trying to say. It's like a type of pudding. I don't know why I can't recall the name of pudding, but it wasn't pudding. It was peanut. It was a version of peanut butter. It was slightly more expensive. Peanut butter you could get back then for a little over $1 in a small jar. This was a small jar of Peanut Wonder. Then I would get dried apricots. And it was all health food store stuff. I was super healthy in my indulgence. And then I would I would get other than Peanut Wonder, then honey, and then like a pound of dates, which at the time I would honestly most of the time try to pay for, because you could buy a pound of dates for about $3.99 back then. Almost $4 in certain places. If not, it could go maybe like as prunes sometimes, because sometimes I would get prunes because it was like a laxative. After 2 days of, of not eating, about 48 hours of really not eating really anything, but something maybe very small, then I would be okay with filling myself up with these dried apricots, these dates, a Peanut Wonder, probably like the whole jar, and then a lot of honey would go in there, and then some bread, one of those round breads that you would get, not the full loaf, but it was like it cost maybe like $0.25 for a piece of it back then. You could get three loaves of it for maybe 75 cents or $1. They were like not a dinner roll, but a little bit bigger, and it had a little powder on the top. It wasn't too bad, but it was enough with all the apricots and everything and the Peanut Wonder for me to kind of lay down on the side of the bed and just kind of rest, And then like one time I remember, I think I ate 20, I don't recommend this, but 20 Met RX bars, which are like a meal replacement bars, which were 100, they had 100 on them. So it was a great amount of calories, but mostly of soy, which would turn in liquid, and then the diarrhea. And after 2 days of not eating, I'd be exactly back at 150 pounds, not a pound gained. Because it was like a soup of vegetables. It was almost like a liquid diet almost. And I just didn't gain weight. And I wasn't trying to gain weight. I was trying to stay at the same weight. But I was not eating correctly, I don't think. It was mostly like fruits and stuff like that. And I would get the protein through the peanut wonder and things like that. So it might have been somewhat okay because I had to get the protein. But I was able to learn on it. There was no alcohol, and there was a little bit of cigarettes. I was smoking a little bit of cigarettes, maybe 3 or 4, maybe daily sometimes. Usually, and I hate to say this, I wrote about it, but sometimes cigarettes that people left behind, I'd clean the end of them. Don't ever do that, but I did sometimes. And then, you know, I would never go out and buy a pack of cigarettes, or I'd ask somebody for a cigarette, you know. So it wasn't bad. It wasn't me eating a lot of pizza. I think the entire time I was in New York City for almost 10 months, about 9 months or so, the entire time I only ate a slice of pizza, but I had the other fruit and the peanut wonder and the bread and things like that. I don't recommend it. It's a lot. It turns into diarrhea. So, but it does keep you somewhat at your weight. And then there was a little bit of bulimic, but not a major problem with bulimia. If I ate a little too much, then I'd maybe throw up a little bit. And it was really important to stay at 150. Now I got up to 170. So, and Lipton wanted me to gain weight. He didn't say it, but I could tell that he wanted me to. He wanted me a little stocky, you know, muscular, big, strong guy. And I did go to gyms, I did work out, and I would run up to sometimes 6 miles a day, or I would run every other day. And especially if I was fasting, it was very hard, but I could run for maybe an hour, as in jogging, and then make it back, and then replenish. So, you know, no, not a lot of breads, but sometimes like a French dinner roll. So I went from 150 to 170, and I left New York at about 170. I kept that weight off until my first marriage. I think I kept that weight off for about 6 years. Okay. Now it's more like meals, you know, but the anger eating, and there's probably some groups that you can go to and talk to people about it, but I try to limit, like if I go to Taco Bell, for an example, which I haven't gone in a while, I try to limit to just the 2 chicken ranch Chipotle, or the Chipotle chicken ranch burrito, just 2 of them only, so that, you know, I limit things where I can have 2. I don't buy more. It's like $4.40 something cents or something, the $2 value menu, and I don't try to get like 5 or 6 burritos and just, you know, rent a movie and go to town. I've done it before, but you can't do that, you know. But I think I was 170 when I met Linda, and then I clocked in at 220 not very long from now, and this has been over 3 years. So the weight management, and also realizing that it's there, the well was very well received, although it's controversial, but it approaches it and it says that it exists. But then it connects that disorder to a sexual orientation, and that's not what this message is about, because I'm straight. So, with probably a flare of Metro. So it's kind of like it exists in all forms and fashion, but you have to limit. You know, self-control is about withdrawing from, let's say if you have a problem, and I don't have a drinking problem, but say you're drinking 15 beers a day, do stop, you know. Let's say you're doing 6 beers a day. Not good, but better. And let's say you're doing 3 beers a day. Pretty good. 2 beers, fine. A couple of beers, you know, a beer or 2, then you're okay, you know, like a beer. So we all have our different ways, you know, but I try to stay away from like sweet candies. Like I did sample some of the yogurt, but I'm not going to buy, like, that yogurt was, you know, for a client. I'm not going to really buy any of that kind of stuff. Now, the 4 tacos at Jack in the Box is only when I'm really hungry and I know that I'm going to work a long shift or something, you know. Didn't do it today. You know, I've been conscious today about, okay, let's get it under control. Let's take it day by day. Let's withdraw off of, let's not do 4 tacos, let's do 2. I know it's going to make me feel a little weak because my body's used to having the 4 tacos. Well, then go through that weak filling and just get through it. Try diet Coke rather than, you know, not too much. I usually split it down the middle, half diet, half regular Coke. Or what I like is Coke Zero, and then a little bit of regular Coke. You know, like just so that there's some calories in it, not to get too one way or another. But no more than, what should be is no more than a soda a day. And this is my only soda for the day. Then I try to switch over to tea, unsweet tea, you know. So I know this turkey neck, you know, I'm like, what am I gonna do? I'm coming up on 50. I'm at Waterburg right now. I'm gonna drop this off at your doorstep, but what am I gonna do, you know? Well, maybe less turkey, you know. And I looked at today, there's 540 calories in a pound of turkey lunch meat. So it's 540, but you dress it with bread, then you have some dressing, you might have some bell peppers, you know, and then, you know, you're jumping the calories up for each sandwich. You do 4 sandwiches a day. That's kind of quite a bit. If you did 2 sandwiches, let's say a sandwich at lunch, and then like a snack sandwich when you're waiting or whatever, that might be okay. Then you're gonna have like your dinner. So if you start off at breakfast, you're fine with 200 calories if you want. You can go larger on breakfast. Then you get your lunch and you might do 200 or 300 calories. You're already up to 500. You might have a drink like a soda, so you jump it up to 600. Then you're good for a 1,200 calorie dinner, which is a big dinner, maybe with some soup. You get some baked potato, maybe a little steak, and you're dealing with like a 1,200 calorie dinner, which is big. But you're going to level it out at 2,000. I think you'll be okay. If you level out at 1,500, you're probably going to start losing some of that weight. But your body is going to react and accept that 1,500 calories, and you're going to be able to function okay. You just have to kind of get off of that and then start slowing down. You might do a brief walk of like 30 minutes. That might help, you know. I used to go out there and do like 6 miles of this jogging and there, all this stuff, and that's just, it's a lot of passion, and then you have that, you know, moment of replenish, you know, which is good, but I think that slows down the artist. I may be wrong, but I think it does, because your art has to be strategic, just like your self-control meal plan.